July 18th, 2023, Board of County Commissioners meeting. Do I have a motion on the Clerk General?
So moved, and yes.
Yes. And the requisitions?
So moved, and yes.
Yes. And that gets us to our next item for business, which is a work session with the Board of Developmental Disabilities. Megan Manuel, welcome.
Let me just start?
Yes,
Okay,
go ahead.
okay. So we are proposing that for next year, we collect our full levy. So I have a little bit of information and I'll give you guys a chance to answer some questions if that works.
That's
Okay.
great.
Sure. So we passed the current levy that we have in 2002. And what we did at that time was we had a 1 mil levy that had been passed in 1980 and a 3 mil levy that had been passed in 1990. And we combined those and passed it into one 4 mil levy in 2002. So we are now in our 20th year with that levy, and we've been rolling back 1.5 of those 4 mils for the last 6 years. In 2017 was the first year that our board passed a resolution to request the Budget Commission to roll back 1.5 mils, and at that time, the county commissioners also passed a resolution and agreed with that, and actually passed a resolution requesting that we do that for 4 years, and we've actually done it for 6. In the last 6 years, while we were doing that rollback, like most of Warren County, we've experienced a lot of growth. So just wanted to kind of share a few statistics regarding different programs that we have and how the growth we've experienced in those last 6 years. Early intervention. So the number of people that we serve, the kiddos that we serve in early intervention from I'm looking at the January 1 of 18 to current. We've experienced a 41.22% increase in that program. Family Supports, which is a program for people who are not on waivers and live with their families and need supports, we've experienced a 159% increase in that. So we've gone from 281 people to 728 people in that program. Transition, which are students in ages 14 to 22 who are still in school and haven't graduated yet. We've experienced a 41% increase in that program. Over that period of time, the number of eligibility assessments, so in order to qualify for our program, you have to go through an assessment process. We've increased the number per year by about 47%. And the total number of people that we serve has gone from 1,679 to 2,396, or almost a 43% increase. So in 6 years, or 5.5 years, I guess you could say, we've drastically increased our numbers. Also, the number of people that we serve, the almost 2,400 people, 65% of those are 22 or under. So we have a lot of young people that we serve, and those, thanks to medical improvements, people are living longer with disabilities, which is a great thing, but we'll have those people longer and longer. Some of the increased costs that we're experiencing moving forward, a lot of Medicaid changes with waivers. So the rates are increasing, and part of the new budget that the state has just put out, a dollar per hour that the direct support professionals are getting are going to be funded by county boards. So that is something that will affect our budget. And the state is also increasing the rates, but that's a one-time cost. So they'll pick a date and say, we're going to give you this much money, so any increased services or any new waivers will all be funded 100% by us. We have 3 kinds of waivers. I'm trying to kind of tell you guys this without having to go too much into detail because it's a very complex system. But we have 3 waivers, and one of our waivers is called a level 1 waiver, and it's actually our lowest waiver, but they just increased the total budget spending for personal services from $67.50 a year to $30,000 for kids and $45,000 for adults. So we pay the match on that. So that increased, and we serve 218 people on that waiver. Something called waiver redesign, where the state's working with a consultant to completely redesign the waiver because it hasn't been done in over 15 years, which will involve increased cost and new services. During the pandemic, we did benefit from an enhanced federal medical assistance percentage, so we pay match on our Medicaid, but during the pandemic, we did get a 6.5% kind of reduction in that. So coming out of that, we will have to pay that moving forward. And then we do pay a 1.25 administrative fee for all services. So as those rates go up, that since it's a percentage, that cost will go up for us as well. And then also just general increased costs for any new waivers and new additional services. Also talked about the growth. There's also a House Bill 7. I don't know if Commissioner Jones is probably familiar with that. But so that does increase the number of people that will be eligible for early intervention, which again is great, but will involve increased costs. And our early intervention program is 100% funded by our local levy. So we also have, as I know the county's been talking about, our salary schedules we've been reviewing, and are also working with a consultant on that to find out, make sure we're competitive. So we're reviewing those, and we'll have some increases with that as well. So just to summarize, our board has always felt it's our duty to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. We don't spend money just because we have it, which is why we were in the situation we've been in. We spend money for the purposes the taxpayers approved, which is to provide services for people with developmental disabilities in Warren County. When we were in a position where we had sufficient funding for what we needed to provide, we willingly requested not to fund the full levy and did it for 6 years. And we're now in a position that based on the needs of the people we're serving, as well as the number of people we are serving, that we feel we need to return to collect the full levy that the taxpayers entrusted to us when they passed the levy in 2002. So our board did pass a resolution again this year, but this time they passed it supporting the full collection. So that's why we did that. So that's
Great. So in a nutshell,
Sure.
this has been a levy that voters have approved. It's
Yes.
the same millage,
Yes.
so millage is a finite amount of money. And because your budget wasn't at the time spending the full amount, instead of just keeping taxpayer cash in a bank, we opted to return those dollars to taxpayers. And now, because costs are increasing, the county is growing, there's more people on waivers and getting services, that you need the full amount of already voted millage that the taxpayers have passed.
You got it.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Great.
Yes, and this will still be at the 2002 rate, so it won't be a new rate, it won't be anything, it'll still be at what the voted-in rate was in 2002.
Questions?
Yeah, I've got two. I mean, I appreciate obviously the work that you do, and it's mission critical for what government does is try to take care of those that need a helping hand. I had another compliment this weekend, literally. Somebody talked about his nephew and how great Warren County is. What is the difference, and I've heard anecdotally multiple times, that the services we provide are above and beyond what surrounding counties do, and anecdotally, there's a lot of people that, quote unquote, move to Warren County for these services, which obviously is a great thing, but then it's also an expense when people are just drawn, because what is it that makes us, or what are we doing that's above and beyond what other people are doing?
Well, that's great to hear, and I mean, because you want to be good at what you do, but I think every county decides how they do their services differently. We are still providing, for example, one of the services we provide that a lot of the counties around us don't provide is community employment. So some do it just through providers. We do have staff that provide job coaching and that kind of stuff because the need is there. We want the people that we serve out working, and we don't have enough providers to do that. If we did, we would probably back out of that and let them do that because it's not a service necessarily we want to be involved in, but we have people that need those services, so we do that. I would like to say that's because the quality of the services we provide are just really, really good. We have good staff, we have good services, but I mean, we aren't doing anything tremendously different than other counties. We just are really good.
And then I know we've obviously had that talk a long time ago, and I think it was all related really to the carryover. So you have dropped the carryover. So what was it and what is it now?
I can't quote what it was. I'm sorry, I don't have that number right here. But
I was thinking
know.
it was like 60 or 70 million.
Yeah,
Is that accurate? 55, okay.
Yeah, at the end of this year, we're projected to, at the end of 2023, our projected carryover for our county fund is going to be about 29.3 million. That's what we're projecting.
So from 55 to 30, essentially.
I think the 55 included your COG funds, which aren't your normal operating fund, I believe.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I believe, I'm looking at the balances in 2007, just county was 46.3 million, projected at the end of this year, 29.3. Just just their county operations, not their COG funds.
Okay, so I mean, I know I've in the past generated this conversation with you all. So your projected budget of actual expenditures in 2024 is gonna be $32 million, approximately $32.5 million, is that right?
I believe that was our.
That was your tax budget.
Okay,
Yes, our
what
appropriations,
I
yeah.
wanna know is what you think you're going to spend in 2024, and then tell me what you're spending in 2023.
I turned to my budget director.
2023, we are.
Can you come to the microphone, please,
Sorry.
and identify yourself for the record, please?
I'm Michelle Swearingen, and I'm the Business Services Director for the County Board.
Thank you.
So for 2023, we are projecting that we will spend $26.7 million. And 2024, we are projected to spend about $29 million.
Okay, now let's go back to the question that you gave us. You have a current fund balance, that is an actual amount in your fund, in the bank, currently of how much money?
Our current fund balance at the county is $30,700,000, and our overall fund balance is $3.4 million less than what it was at this point last year.
Okay, now, so with regard to your collections, because everything you get is basically from our real estate taxes?
About 85% of our revenue is from real estate taxes.
And the other percentage, we get something from the state?
We get very little from the state. We get some from the feds via a mechanism called targeted case management, which is a way that our service coordinators can actually bill for their services. And then administrative staff can also do some billing for services, and that's under a program called Medicaid Administrative Claiming.
Okay, so my question then really is this. What is your, at the current collection amount, which was, you were not collecting the total millage that was approved way back when, but because I know that I think in 2017, we didn't raise your rates. Isn't that what happened? I'm just trying to remember now how we did this, because we reduced by about, I think about $9.5 million a year of collections on your developmental disabilities real estate tax collections.
Which was a rollback.
It was a rollback, and the way this worked was that we either didn't collect, we didn't raise, so when we do when a millage can be changed, you can keep it at the same collection rate as before, or sometimes you can raise it up so that you maybe keep the same millage, but now you're gonna collect more money because you're gonna multiply it times the improvement value of all the real estate coming in and everything else.
These levies are fixed levies.
Well, I know that,
They
but
don't change.
But they can change the amount you collect. And I know that our auditor can do a much better job at explaining how this works. So there's a replacement levy and there's a renewal levy, and there's a difference in terms, not necessarily in how the millage works, but in terms of how it's applied and whether it can change the amount of money that a particular taxpayer is going to be spending. And so what I want to understand is first, what is your burn rate right now on your fund that you've got, the 30.7 million? So what are you burning of that amount a year? And then if you're making a change this year, your board's recommending something, I want to understand how that affects our rate payers. And maybe, Matt, you can speak to this because you know, you can express this way better than I can, but there's a distinctive difference in how this thing could work. So Matt, can you tell us what they're suggesting?
Everything you're saying, Commissioner Matt Nolan, Warren County Auditor, everything you're saying is correct about how renewals and replacement works, but that has nothing to do with what we're doing here. This levy was passed in 2002 as a continuing levy. It's never been renewed or replaced since, so it's been collecting at that same gross rate, then effectively gone down every 3
Okay,
years.
so let's explain how this works. So what you're saying is that we've always been collecting the same amount of money every year?
Up until 2017.
Okay, right, because then we reduced it.
You chose, right, we can say who, but the board recommended to everyone, the Budget Commission and commissioners reduced it $1.5 million.
Right, so what occurs, so the public understands this, if it's a set rate of collection amount, as improved property comes in, they will pay based upon what they come in on the year they come in. They approve the value of their property, and then they start paying more because of that. And that means the effective rate of all the other people that were there are paying less.
That's exactly right.
So people have to understand that when you have a millage amount that is pegged to an exact amount of money you're going to collect, as property real estate gets improved, they pay an additional amount, but all the other people whose property hasn't been improved actually will pay less amounts. So now, having said that, what's happening with what's being suggested this year on our ratepayers?
The proposal is that they raise the levy back to collect the 1.5 mils that was voted for, but we've rolled back for the last 6 years, which is effectively $28 per 100,000 in new taxes. So-
Okay, so people have to understand what was just said there. So we rolled back in 2017 that amount of money, which I think countywide amounted to about $9.5 million tax cut in effect. And now we're gonna collect that now, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now, and the way this is gonna impact people, is the same now with everybody? Everybody's gonna pay, if they've got $100,000 of taxable valuation, they're gonna be paying another $28 per that $100,000.
$100,000, if you've got a $100,000 home, you're paying an additional $28.
Okay, so everybody understands this. You don't pay your tax, your real estate tax on the actual market rate of your home. Because there's a 35% reduction on that. So that what our auditor is doing, he appraises your property on a market value basis. Then there's actually a taxable basis, which is 35% of that. And then, so people understand that then the millage amount is multiplied times that 35%, that's your taxable amount, and then you divide that by 1,000, and that's your tax, which is the $28. Did I express that correctly?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so now I'd like to know, because this is really the denouement of what I'm really asking. Once we increase this, basically a collection of $9.5 million total dollars a year up, and everybody's paying another $28 times 100,000, they're gonna pay $28 per 100,000 evaluation. So if you've got a home that's worth $300,000, it's worth more than that, but once you get the 35% credit, you're gonna pay $28 more. So if the average home in Warren County is what, $350, almost $400,000, something like
Yeah,
that range?
closer to 3, but yeah, say a $300,000 house, you're gonna be paying, 72 extra.
Okay, so that's the real world example. Now, here's my question, Matt, and maybe you're the best one to answer this. At the current level, if we go back to the $9.5 million, are they building the fund back up, or are they still burning the fund that they've got?
So I am not the best one to answer that. Based on the numbers this year, the fund would start growing again, which
Okay.
is my concern. However, what Megan laid out, and Michelle will give you details, because of changes in the state legislature and how these funding mechanisms are going to work, there is no doubt that their expenditures are going up. The only doubt is how much they're going up. And that I don't have an answer to. I don't know that they have an exact answer to. So I don't believe, based on everything I've seen, that the fund will grow. The only question I have is how much it will keep coming down.
Okay. This is why I wanted to know that yearly burn rate, because when you've got a fund of 30-some million dollars, in other words, I mean, we know that we should be setting a tax rate where you're not below your funding needs. And we know that you have growth in those needs, and so this can't be we're never gonna be exact here. But because your fund balance was so large in the past, this is what happened in 2017. I asked these same questions in 2017, and that's when we then dropped this thing. Because your fund balance was so large, we felt like we shouldn't be taxing. We were overtaxing our taxpayers because we kept building your fund way up and way up and way up. And so now we reversed that trend, so you were reducing the fund balance. But even though it's been reduced, it's still very substantial. So my only question was, if we didn't do anything, that we kept it the same, I know we would burn it off faster. And you believe, though, that we should reverse it this year, even though we really don't know what that burn rate really is? I know that Dave completely gets what I'm saying here. And the fact is, it's not clear to me that we shouldn't continue to burn off this $30 million.
My question relates to, the aggregate, the finite amount is only $9.5 million that this revenue, or this levy generates?
No. That was the difference.
That's the additional
between-
1.5
That's
mils.
one.
Okay, that's,
1.5 mils.
what's the total levy bringing in?
The total 4 mils?
Yeah, whatever I know we rolled back part of it. What is
The
your?
last time that we collect 4 mills was in 2017, and we collected 21.3 million.
Okay, so that's a full 4 mils. So theoretically, if you didn't do anything right now,
You couldn't have your budget.
you,
Because your burn rate, I don't think they're collecting 21.3 this year. What do you collect, auditor?
That
What
was
did they
the
collect last year?
21.3 was the last time we collected 4 mills.
No. I want to know
For
what the
22.
actual
so you were
amount
more like
is.
12 million or
We
something?
collected 15.6 in 2022.
Okay, that's how much you collected?
Correct.
15.6?
Correct.
So if we stayed the same, Matt, we would still be collecting around that amount of money?
Correct.
Okay, so if you're
They'd blow through
collecting
another
50.
13 million of their.
Right. So in 3 years, you would be out of your funds. That's basically what I think that means. Okay, well, that's helpful to understand that. You've got enough cushion, but you're gonna be losing your cushion within 3 years.
But that's 3 years with their funds under the current budget. What I think the issue that the auditor and the department is raising is that there are known increases with unknown costs because of policy changes in this recent state budget that is going to mandate hourly rate increases for their direct care providers, as well as some differences in how services are going to be delivered. And so that's the unknown, is they know it's going to go up. There are some things that are predictable in terms of how much it's going to go up, but there's a lot that they don't yet know how these policy changes are going to work. And so I think that's the issue. So if it were based on this calendar year's budget, in 3 years, if we made no changes in 3 years, that reserve would be burnt down. Now, as you're starting to try to project these increased costs, is it 2.5 years? Is it 2 years? Is it 1 year? I think that's what we're trying to grapple with. But the fixed amount is still a 4 mil levy last, based on the 2002 rate.
I'm looking at it a little bit even deeper, that systemically, where are we going with what is being spent and what's being brought in? Matt, so you're saying that 21 million is what's been brought in since 2002? If the last time they fully collected was 21.3 million.
That, correct,
on a full
that was the
collection,
amount in 2017.
That's what's been collected since.
Every year.
Yeah, because that's a finite amount. It doesn't change based on valuations.
So it does a little bit, and this is what Commissioner Grossman was saying. The words we use is new construction equals new money. So every time somebody puts a deck on, every time a new house gets built, a little more gets added. And so right now it'd be collecting, it was at 22 in 2017, it'd be collecting about 25 now. So you do get more money with new construction.
Okay,
So
that
it
was,
does
But not new valuation.
Right, when I go and raise the value 15% every 3 years, as we've done for the last 3 cycles, that doesn't add anything to these levies. It adds to the general fund, but doesn't add any to the senior service, doesn't add any to DD. But every time there's new construction, they get a little bit of new money, and to Tom's point, it then helps lower everybody else's.
all right, I was just going systemically, you can't have an $8 million burn rate each year moving forward that, because I remember when the budget was a heck of a lot lower than this, and we were generating these huge surpluses, and I remember about waivers. How many discussions did we have 15, 18 years ago about waivers all the time? We had a waiting list. Why do we have a waiting list if we voted this in? Go put people on the program. This was, a long time ago. But if we're gonna be bringing in 25 million, and you're saying you're gonna spend 29 million, you're saying organically, there's gonna be a $4 million shortfall moving forward, and that's structural, that's not going to change, is what you're saying is costs are gonna continue to go up, so then in a matter of years, then you're gonna be talking about we're not collecting enough?
Well, what you're saying is we work several times a year constantly to do projections. So we are constantly trying to determine where we're going to land. Yes, what you're saying would be true if things stayed static. As we know, things never stay static. Things are always changing. As Commissioner Jones commented, that a lot of these changes, we really are trying to figure out what the impact of these changes are going to be. And quite frankly, as some of those changes occur, our administrative team will have to determine how we want to respond to those things. I mean, please know that our board, we are very concerned about the taxpayers receiving the best services for the best value that they possibly can.
And none of my comments hopefully are saying that anything to the contrary. I understand that. It's just the structural imbalance of what you're spending versus what, even with 4 mills, what you're bringing in. And I see an 8.6% spending increase year over year. In normal government world, that's not sustainable over time. If you keep growing your budget almost 9% the next few years, you will be turning around in short order and saying, we need to raise a levy.
Yeah, and we're not saying that it's gonna grow by 8% every year, but at the same time, our, budgets, when you have a levy, you're not gonna necessarily have your revenue and your expenses equal and never change. Especially when we have a carryover that we're being told we need to reduce. So if we have to, the only way to reduce a carryover is to spend more than you're receiving. That's the only way to reduce
Well,
a
I'm not
carryover.
encouraging you to spend more because you've got a surplus.
And that's not, we don't, that's why we're in this situation. So, but what we're saying is if we collect, we're still going to be collecting more than we're spending. That's why we need to collect the full levy, but we have to reduce that carryover without building it back up. So we need to spend that money for what it was voted in for, which is services for people.
Wait a second. I'm missing something here. I want you to spend money to provide the services that should be provided. I don't want you to spend money to burn your surplus.
That's not what I said. I'm saying, we're asking for the money so we can spend it on the services that we're providing, but by doing that, we're gonna have more expenses than we do revenue. So
Okay.
it's gonna be spent on services.
We're trying to figure out what what your actual burn rate is, because we wanna keep taxes as low as possible, but we wanna be responsible so that we don't affect your fund balances so that you cannot provide the services that you'd
And
be
that's what we want to
providing.
do, absolutely.
All right. I mean, my feeling, I don't know if we're at a point where we're gonna talk about, I have a feeling, I'm gonna agree with your request that you go back and we give you back the 9.5 million. And then I'd like to revisit this after you've had a full tax year of collection to see whether you're building that fund back up or whether we've kind of hit a sweet spot where it's kind of equal, or whether you're still burning. And then I'd like to see the burn rate, so I would like to revisit this at that point.
We have no problem continuing conversations with you, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because, I mean, again, that was structurally my concern of, I don't want in a short period of time to turn around and say, we need even more money. And,
We don't want that either, I promise you that.
That's the last thing that we want.
Right. We want to be able to utilize the money for what the taxpayers voted it in and stay away from having to go back for more money as long as possible.
which is why I asked the initial question about, are we doing something different? It's, again, anecdotally, when people, how great it is, and are we doing something about, are we spending money above and beyond what other counties in the area are spending it on? That was kind of, because, again, it's great, and if you're doing it better, so be it. Matt, you got a comment on that?
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing about it, because it's the exact issue that I brought up as well. All the other counties are in worse financial shape than our DD board is. And so my concern is nothing with Megan and Michelle. My concern is that the state is going to have to intervene to help these other counties, and when they do so, they'll help us as well. And so I think Commissioner Grossman's point is the exact right point, is that we should do this now, but monitor it, because I think the state's gonna have to step in to help the other counties, and in doing so, raise our balances back up, inadvertently, but as part of it. So that's the only concern I have. I think Michelle's numbers are exactly right as they sit now, but it's not sustainable for 50, 60 other counties if the state keeps requiring local governments to take on this responsibility. It is probably sustainable for Warren County, but it's not for most other counties, so they're going to have to do something. So that's where my concern was. Megan and Michelle are doing it better than other people. They just are. And you can see that when you look at the numbers around.
But that's where the conversation needs to turn, is what is the state's role in providing these services equitably across the state, as opposed to relying on taxpayers in a given geographic county to be able to provide those services. And so, when I'm listening to what you're saying, Megan, the thing that I'm thinking about is the fact that we are serving a lot of very young children in this system, as well as adolescents. But as those children grow up, many of them continue to need intensive services through the life course, not just of childhood, but into adulthood. And so when you consider we're now at roughly 1/3 of the services of the constituents that you're serving are adults, and 2/3 of them are children, and as adults age, and as adults with disabilities age, and their needs earlier in their adulthood are much greater. And so this is a long-term, challenge that all communities are gonna face, is that we have more and more, whether it's through better surveillance, whether it's through better medicine or what have you, we are identifying children much earlier in their life as having a disability. And that may mean for some of those children, lifelong supports are going to be needed for them and their families who are caring for them. And so that's the piece that I'm always looking at as, how are we thinking about providing intensive services, particularly to infants and toddlers, as a way to, and supporting those families as a way to bend that cost curve of the intensity of services that those babies are going to need over their life course. And so I guess I say this to you to both, it's more of a rhetorical question, but one that I suspect you're thinking a lot about, because that kind of number is, not good for being able to keep a levy at where it is.
Absolutely.
And things like, I suspect, autism spectrum surveillance and very expensive therapies for that are contributing to the number of kids that are in your system now?
Yeah, it's definitely the earlier diagnoses and those kinds of things that are bringing them in sooner and staying longer. Yep.
We do serve a lot of children in Warren County.
Do we need to pass anything to approve of this, Bruce?
Yeah, you'll need
Yeah.
to do a
resolution.
resolution to place back on the 1.5 mils that we're currently not collecting.
And is the expectation that we do that today?
Matt's saying, no, we don't need to do it.
So I think that the process, as I understand it, is that, and you've already done, you've approved their budget request, and we'll do the
We
budget
did
process.
approve the tax.
The budget commission will vote on this. The board of DD has already voted on it. The budget commission will vote on it at our meeting in August to officially put it back on. I think that's the only.
Yeah, because we didn't actually take it off. We asked them to do it.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, they came to you and said they were going to do it, was what happened, a long time ago. And group effort, right? Everybody's worked on this together. And so kind of back then, they came to everybody and said they'd like to do it. They thought they should do it, and we all agreed. And now they're coming to us and saying, we think we should put it back on. And what I'm hearing is we should all agree. Now, there's two members of the Budget Commission that aren't here. They need to be consulted as well, and the prosecutor and treasurer. But I would suspect they would support this group's decision.
Aren't we the appointing authority?
You are the appointing authority, and you are the levying authority.
Yeah.
So you would put a levy on. If we were going to renew, replace, do any of that, that would go through this body. But within what you put on the ballot in 2002, the DD and Budget Commission are the only ones that can really adjust that.
So you're
Really.
saying unilaterally, we couldn't roll back any part, but we could stop the levy and ask to increase the,
I think you could take the levy off completely. You could ask to increase it, but within that, I don't think you have any authority to do it. We've had this debate over the years back, a long time ago when there was disputes. Don't think we need to just, we're all on the same page. We don't need to worry about it a whole lot. But, yeah, that's my
This isn't
reading.
a levy year. We're not approving a levy this year. We're not voting on a levy this year. And the decision with what the collection is of the levy is not our decision.
I believe that's correct.
And so all you've done is inform us. We've asked a bunch of questions that I think are relevant to how you would make your decision, but it's not our decision to make.
Megan, we really appreciate your partnership. You've just continued to do a really great job on behalf of Warren County taxpayers. We really appreciate both the heart with which you approach your work, but also the strong financial wherewithal. So thank you for your leadership.
Very much. We appreciate your partnership as well.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have a work session with our county engineer, Neil Tunison. This is relative to roadway and streets construction standards. Morning.
Morning. Hi. We're, have a resolution to do an advertisement for a public hearing that we'd like to hold next month. We want to update our road construction standards. Over the years, we've had a pretty good road construction standard that met our needs, but we're seeing changes in the past 10 years where our pavement is just not holding up in our subdivisions. We've got subdivisions that have multiple phases, so we see construction traffic going through subdivision streets to get to the new sections. We are seeing a different type of asphalt that's we didn't experience 20 and 30 years ago. It's more brittle, so it's not able to handle repetitive loading like it used to. We also are seeing changes in how subdivisions are maintained. We have property owners that do a lot of lawn sprinkling, and we're seeing water getting from that irrigation into our pavement. Sub-base, we just had pavement based on compacted subgrade, but now we're getting water into that subgrade and really softening it up and creating more flexure on the pavement and which creates more deterioration of it. So we just see a lot of changes that we're trying to adopt or we're trying to adapt to. So we've got changes that we've presented to you that we would like to go ahead and we've been talking to the developer group, the professional engineers that do work for the developers, and been getting comments from them on that. So they've seen what we've been doing. We'll get this out to other professional groups, but we'd like to hold meetings next month to go over these changes. So we've given you a copy of that so you can take a look at it in your spare time. But,
So the last time these been updated is 1995.
there have been certain sections that we've kind of updated, but you're right, the big change was back in 95.
Yeah,
That's
I'm just
when-
looking at
yeah.
what June 27th, 1995
Right.
says here, I imagine, yeah, and this whole big thing.
Right.
Some bits and pieces have been amended over time.
If they have, they're not noted,
No, that's, I believe,
so
I
not
was thinking,
legislatively adopted.
Yeah.
There may have been a practice that deviated or changed, but if the code or does not provide for that, then
right,
maybe that didn't
I
happen.
was thinking that we had made changes since 95, but 95 is the last date,
Mm-hmm.
correct? Correct.
They all go so fast,
Yeah,
don't
they
they?
What are the big changes that you've made?
We have the cross-section, we used to have, like I said, we used to have 8.5 inches of asphalt, 7 inches of bituminous base, which is a more coarse material, and then 1.5 inches of the finer asphalt on top of that. And we've changed, that is one thing that we've changed, that we went from 5 inches of that base, put 2 inches of finer graded material, and then 1.5 inches of the surface course, all on subgrade. But we're now going with a granular subgrade. We're going to be putting in around 6 inches of gravel on top of the subgrade. We'll put under drains. We have not used under drains in the past, and that will handle a lot of that surface water that gets down into the pavement and take it off, so that it's not keeping that subgrade drier. And
Neil, when you say
functional
we,
better.
are you talking about public roads that we maintain and have,
Yes.
or you're saying this is a new building standard for developers?
These are basically building standards for developers, but we're using this already on some of our projects. You know, we're using that on some of the road projects that we're working on, especially where we're using federal funds. We go with what the ODOT has in their standards. So, and that's what we're doing. We're kind of mirroring more what ODOT does in their pavement sections.
Yeah, because you're not doing, well, I would have assumed you're not doing underflow type of stuff or subflow type of stuff for existing roads, but I guess you can.
Yeah.
But, that's for new construction,
New
which is
construction,
generally
exactly.
from developers,
New
correct?
construction, correct.
So you're asking us to have a public hearing?
Correct, and we will need two. We'll need, because we're changing standards and regulations, we'll need 2 hearings.
And then Bruce, does this come back to the board for action?
Yes. Yeah,
So-
we'll have a public legislative hearing.
Hearing after
Today,
that.
they're just saying, set this for a hearing. I'll tweak this, Tina, afterwards. To set the public hearing, advertise the public hearing. They'll have 2 public hearings before you can take any action, and then you will adopt
And
it.
then it comes back to us
Correct.
based on the outcome of the public hearing, and then we'll have our process.
Your public hearing is
You're the
your
public
process.
hearing, you're holding the public hearing here.
Oh, got it. Okay, now I'm making the connection. You're asking us to have a public
And then
hearing.
the HBA folks, et
Will
cetera,
come
will
in
come in
and-
and comment.
That's what I wanted to make sure, is that the interested parties would have a chance to come to us, but that's what you're asking us, is to let the interested parties come in and talk to you about this.
Yeah, and they've been working with them already.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
That's what I heard. Well, is there a resolution, or
I'll just read it by title only.
is there
Have a
a,
resolution to set the public hearings relative to the adoption of new requirements and standards for the design and construction of streets and roadway facilities in Warren County.
I'll make a motion, we pass that resolution.
And second?
roll call, please?
Mrs. Jones?
Yes,
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
great,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
One more thing, have you, Bruce, have you?
Yes.
Got the contract?
Tina has it.
Very good, thank you.
How are we coming on the new bridge?
Well, very well. The girders were set back in May and June, early June. And we've got the roundabout in front of the Peters Cartridge now done, so all the traffic going into the Peters Cartridge plant will now come in off of Grandin Road. And we're begin soon, we'll start tearing out the old bridge. We're putting in fill for the, coming up to the new bridge from the Kings Mill side. We've got the force main, the sewer force main that's already on there, and I think they're pretty close to having the whole water main put on that. It's going to be between the girders and under the concrete deck, and they're starting to form the concrete deck. So things are moving along pretty well.
Awesome.
We hope to have it done by Christmas. There's a lot of work to do between now and then, but we're more than 2/3 of the way done with it.
It's only taken us, what, 15, 18 years?
That's about right. Yeah. When you cross the Little Miami, when you cross the scenic river, it takes a while.
100%.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Neil.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda, Tiffany, the BMOC and tennis tournament.
Sure, as we
discussion.
move forward, we just wanted to make sure that the commissioners maybe are still interested in making sure that we keep the tennis tournament. I know that there's been several discussions that have been had, and so we just felt like it was important to maybe make sure that we're still on the same page and that we potentially designate a commissioner. I know Dave's been involved, Tom's been involved, but to designate one person should negotiations need to be had or meetings to be attended.
I asked for this simply because in a public setting, I just wanted to ask 2 questions. Number one, does the board have an interest in participating in keeping the Western Southern tennis tournament? And I think we need to say that publicly, you know, in an open session. Yes, we have an interest of participating in keeping the tournament. So that's question number one. I, for one, want to try to keep the tennis tournament. So I just wanted in a public setting that the commissioners say, yes, we're engaged, we want to keep the tennis tournament.
Sure, I think that the answer is yes, and, I mean, I've been to a large group meeting and smaller discussions, and I know that Dave has been involved with discussions as well. I'm not familiar with what Shannon has been involved with, but I know that she's expressed interest, so.
Yeah, I think it's in the county's best interest to try to keep it. I think the question is at what cost are we willing to keep it, and it's not an unlimited cost.
Sure, so one, I just want to make sure publicly we're in the game, we're trying to keep it. And then number two, I would like some sort of, I don't want to call it authority, but acknowledgement that I'm talking to these folks and yes, try to represent. And then obviously that's in a public session of, this is what's been discussed, does the board support this or not support this? And that would all happen, obviously, in a public setting. But I just want to make sure that publicly, my colleagues are telling me, yeah, keep doing what you're doing and talking to these folks.
Sure.
It's as simple as that.
We're all
Yeah.
approving of that. We know
Yeah.
that that's been happening. We would like to keep the tennis tournament. We know we're in competition now with a very particular city and a very particular proposal that has been publicized. I'm assuming what the public has said is correct, or the public papers are correct, and that is that they're thinking about moving it to Charlotte, North Carolina. And they're actively seeking, funding from Charlotte, North Carolina, and approval for funding. And previously, there were requests for funding from Ohio and ourselves and Mason, and letters were sent that are public documents, so people will know that. But my position is that we should do what we can within reason to keep this tournament.
Fair enough. That's all I was asking my colleagues, and I think that's appropriate in a public session, that we know what's going on, and we're in the game, and we're just saying, stay in the game.
Yeah,
Right.
Okay, that's all, that was it.
that makes
Thanks.
total
So
sense.
now we have an executive session.
I believe Tina
Wait,
has
we have
some,
a couple of things not
Yeah.
on the consent agenda.
First is a resolution to amend Resolution 23-0858 to further authorize the county administrator to execute a joint application with the county prosecutor to apply for an order from the Court of Common Pleas authorizing the Board of County Commissioners to employ legal counsel as a contingent fee, on a contingent fee basis for the PFAS litigation.
So moved.
Second?
And roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
The next thing I have is a resolution to amend the Warren County Assigned Fee Council schedule to establish capital case rate of $140 per hour pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 120.33D, which is mandated by the state.
Okay, I'll move for that we approve that rate increase.
And yes?
Yes.
And the last thing I have is an add-on resolution to hire Jenna Bohr as a Warren County Water and Sewer Utility Clerk 1 within the Water and Sewer Department.
So moved.
And yes?
Yes.
That's all that I have.
All right, so now I'll make a motion that we go into executive session for acquisition of property pursuant to ORC 121.22 G2.
And yes. Well, second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.